Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/spookshow. Then go over to morbidlybeautiful.com as we are now part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcasting Network.
It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder.
Have you checked the children?
I want to play a game. The box. You opened it. We came.
Here.
This is the All-American Spookshow.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the All-American Spook Show podcast. I'm Josh. I'm joined here with Donnie.
Yo.
Will.
Hey.
And the Professor Smoke.
What's up?
And today we're going to be talking about a movie that we've had in the back pocket for 5 years. Because literally next week, we're going to be celebrating our 5th anniversary proper. As we always wait till Halloween to kind of celebrate it. But technically, I think we're actually past our 5th anniversary, the actual date. You know, quote unquote, I think the date would be the airing of the first episode. And I don't have that with me, but that was like mid-October 2018 when we did that. So technically, we're already past the 5th anniversary, but we always celebrate it at Halloween. So we're kind of waiting to have the full festivities next week. But this is the movie that we're talking about today, though. We've had it stowed away. We've waited. We didn't necessarily wait to this point on purpose. It was just kind of like, well, let's just wait till the right time to do it, because this is a really big one. And we've done a lot of big ones over the past year, but I think this one, if it's not as good as those, it's better than those. And we're going to be talking about Halloween from 1978, the original, the one that started it all, the original Michael Myers flick. Not our first John Carpenter movie. I think our first one was finally just this past summer when we did The Thing, right? I don't think we had done another one before.
No, we hadn't.
So we had already introduced John Carpenter, but one could argue whether or not this is John Carpenter's best. I mean, and I'm sure maybe we can get into that debate between The Thing and this one, and and maybe if somebody else wants to throw a wild card in there. But either way, I mean, clearly this is you could at least say this was the beginning of his prime years, right here with this one. A slash one of the movies that kind of defined the slasher genre for sure, and I'm sure we'll get into all that jazz here today. So, but before we dive into it, as always, we want to remind you, first and foremost, this is important today too. We are a spoiler-filled podcast, so if you've never listened to us, and if for some reason, what are the fucking odds at this point that you've never seen Halloween, the original from 1978? But if you haven't, you want to go ahead and pause, go watch it, and then come back, because we are going to spoil it. And also, we want to remind you to go check out aaspookshow.com. That's the center of the Spook Show universe. From there, you can get to our podcast archives, all of our content over on YouTube. We got lots of series, different takes on stuff, shorter form videos and stuff over there. Also, our Patreon, patreon.com/aaspookshow, where every month you get Crafterpiece Theater, video minisodes, all kinds of cool stuff going on over there. So you don't want to miss out on any of that. So go to aaspookshow.com to find all that stuff. That's the easiest place to find it. So without any further build-up, let's go ahead and toss to the trailer for Halloween.
Halloween night. A small American town. 15 years ago.
Michael?
Halloween.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil. think he'll come back.
Exploring uncharted territory.
Totally charted.
Just talk.
Sure. The only reason she babysits is to have
Halloween.
Okay. Come on out. Halloween, the night he came home.
All right, there you go. That's that. So I guess we can take a minute here to talk about our histories with this movie, right? Because obviously this is, well, Will, I'm not going to say that with you. This isn't the first time you've seen this, is it?
No.
Okay. So
I couldn't tell you the first time that I've seen it, but no, I've seen it multiple times.
So, yeah, and I'd say the same for all of us, right? Donnie, what's
Yeah.
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 And Smoke,
Same.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen it 147 times, own it on every format.
But like Will was, I really can't remember the first time. I don't remember the experience of watching this the first time around anymore because I don't know, just seeing it so many times, I guess, over the year.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the first.
Honestly, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I want to say the first time I probably watched it might have been on like, you know, an edited version on local TV or something back in the day, probably, but I don't really recall the very first time. But have you guys ever seen that video that I've seen floating around a number of times? That supposedly the climactic moment of the movie, you know, when Laurie and Michael are you know, fighting back and forth, she's running from them and all that, and then, you know, to get into the way it ends, you know, which we'll get more into later, when he sits up, all the climactic moments all the way to the end, right? Have you ever seen that clip where it's supposedly the audience reaction to that? So it's like you're watching it, but you hear the audience in 1978 reacting to these moments, supposedly.
Yeah, I have not. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen what you're referencing.
It's just you're watching the movie, right? You're just watching, let's say, like the last 5 to 10 minutes of the movie. But in the background, it's an audience. It's the audience reaction to, like, say, the audience watching it in 1978. So I guess someone recorded in the audience audio of people screaming and gasping and everything while they're watching this in 1978. It's really cool.
So they have it like a director, well, kind of like a commentary, kind of a separate audio track with that playing while you're watching the last bit of the movie.
Yeah, I guess
That's
so.
what you say?
Or like basically, I guess it's just they just took the audio recording from people watching it, and then they just applied it to the last 5 or 10 minutes of the movie. You know, so you can kind of.
It's on the DVD.
No, I don't even. Honestly, I don't even think it's on the DVD. This is something I saw on YouTube or, you know, something like that in the past handful of years. But I'll try to find that link and I'll send it out and I'll post it to the socials or anything if I can find it. But it's really cool to get that reaction of people watching this in 1978. And like Michael sits up, you know, he does the Undertaker setup and all that, which we'll get into. Everybody just starts screaming and stuff, you know, like it's just, you can tell it's just like, this is the most horrifying thing, you know, people have seen up to this point in 1978. It's pretty good. Needless to say, I think we all, you know, have watched this movie a number of times and we've all enjoyed it, but will it hold up? That's the age old question of our friends over on the Travis Roy
Cinema
9 podcast. That's their question. Yeah. Will this hold up? What are our star ratings and our thoughts on it? We'll get to that at the end. You want to stick around for that, but I guess I'll go ahead and get into some of the background information. Lord knows there's a lot, and I'm going to open up the floor to you guys to throw some extra stuff out there, but I found the usual information and a couple other bonus things. Alternate titles for this movie. We've got the complete title, which is just John Carpenter's Halloween, right? Then there was a promotional title that I found, which I'm guessing would have been used in the build up to this coming out. And it was just called He Came Home for Halloween, which is one of those weird long Italian titles, right, Smoke? You know, He Came Home for Halloween.
That made it sound more like a giallo, huh?
Yeah.
Which is kind of
it would have been cool, but I don't know if it would have hit as well as Halloween did. But then there's the working title of the film, The Babysitter Murders, which that would have been, I mean, it would have worked, obviously. You probably would have been watching this movie saying, like, you know, when the hell is the babysitter going to get it? Because, you know, it takes quite a while, right? Like, even for you to get to the kind of the babysitter part of the movie. So,
and speaking of the murders thing, that was kind of a nod in the newer Halloween movies. I think they referred to it that way, right? On the news segments or something. I remember. Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah. Which I think we've all kind of, in a way, put that new trilogy kind of out of our minds for a little while, but yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. I think they did do that. Especially the third one where Halloween ends, right? All right, anyways, this movie was released October 25th, 1978. It was produced by Compass International Pictures, Falcon International Pictures, and was distributed by Compass International Pictures and Aquarius Releasing. Of course, this is rated R, total runtime of 1 hour and 31 minutes. On IMDb, it's listed as a horror/thriller. It was filmed, ironically, you know, it's supposed to be in Haddonfield, Illinois, right? None of it was filmed there. It was all filmed around various parts of Hollywood, Pasadena, and some other neighboring cities and towns there in the Los Angeles area from April 10th to May 13th of 1978. Forget this, a budget of $325,000 estimated. Now, some numbers had it a little less, but generally what I could find is most people agreed that it was about $325,000 budget for this movie. Which, you know, I guess shouldn't be a shocker when you watch the movie. It's a fairly simple movie, really, you know. Nothing crazy as far as production and post-production would have been involved here.
And not even crazy as far as special effects either. I mean, when you think about it, it's kind of like Texas Chainsaw in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. But just like Texas Chainsaw, went on to gross $47.1 million. Now, I saw some other numbers. I saw a 70 million number too. So I don't know exactly, you know, the best sources that I usually use said around 47.1, and that was including one of the re-releases. I think the 2020 re-release or something. It earned another close to 200K when it got re-released then. But I didn't see any. I only saw in a couple places that said 70. So it's, needless to say, it's somewhere between 50 and 70 million. I'm sure there's some weird bookkeeping going on with the movie from 1978, so no one's sure, but clearly a very successful flick. It was directed, and part of the screenplay was written by John Carpenter, who you may know best from The Thing, The Fog, Escape from New York. I mean, the list goes on and on. We talked about him. Yeah, well, we talked about him when we did The Thing. And I'm sure at that point we even said we're going to be doing a Spookshow spotlight at some point very soon on John Carpenter. So we'll leave the long talk.
No question.
We'll leave the long talk there for that. But needless to say, one of the best, if not arguably the best, horror director, at least of the modern era. I don't think many would dispute that. The screenplay was also written by Deborah Hill, who at the time was his girlfriend, I believe, or his fiance or something. Smoke, you might know better. Did they ever get married, or were they just boyfriend and girlfriend and then eventually split apart?
And I don't remember either. I mean, I know they were a couple, but yeah, I don't know if they are.
Well,
maybe he's his fucking lady friend.
Yeah, well, at this point, they were dating, for sure. And so, therefore, her filmography credits look a lot like his up to a certain point. You know, like, she was a writer and a producer on tons of stuff, including Escape from New York, Escape from L.A., The Fog. Unfortunately, she passed back in 2005, so she's no longer with us, but clearly her imprint on the horror genre is just as big as John Carpenter's, you know, as history will prove out. This movie stars Donald Pleasance as Loomis. I mean, the guy had. I mean, unfortunately, he passed away back in 1995, and he had a hell of a career. I mean, he was in The Great Escape, You Only Live Twice. He's got 242 acting credits on IMDb. But Smoke, you could argue that this will probably be the one that he's remembered for forever, right?
Yeah. It's and like I said, we'll get to later on what our maybe personal favorites are. But yeah, there's really no argument that this is up there in the top for historical reasons, for just it being a great movie and for being important to slasher movies and horror in general. I mean, definitely will be remembered probably most for this one, even if it might not necessarily be everybody's favorite of his movie.
It also stars Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie. Pretty sure, was this her very first?
It was, yes. She had only done, she had only done TV at that time.
Which is crazy. And now she was the daughter of Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. Now, Janet Leigh was in Psycho, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
which one of the reasonings he wanted Jamie Lee Curtis.
So yeah, obviously, and Donnie, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe she was the Spookshow Scream Queen.
She was
this year, correct? Yeah. So we're just going to add another layer to that, kicking off the quote unquote new year here for us. That we've already checked in with Jamie Lee Curtis right out the gates. So there's that. Once again, she's worth a Spook Show spotlight as well. So that I would imagine that's coming one of these days.
Yeah, unfortunately, we will have to cover Mother's Boys on that. Sorry, guys.
Oh yeah, that's right. We already did that one as well. So yeah. Well, Donnie, you and Smoke weren't there for that. That was
strategic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a strategy.
I don't think you.
Son of a something.
I don't think either of you put that much thought into it. It was just, well, I can't do it.
Yeah, well, Mother's Boys.
Well, that's kind of the way Will and I thought when we had to watch it and talk about it. So, it also stars Nancy Keys as Annie, PJ Souls as Linda, Charles Cyphers as Brackett, Kyle Richards, who went on to like one of the housewife shows, one of those 18 of those Real Housewives of blah, blah, blah shows. And Brian Andrews as Tommy. Really, there's a few other players, but that's your major players. And a good handful of those, the ones that weren't slaughtered in this movie, did reappear in that newer Halloween trilogy because, they tried to make as many connections as they possibly could to this movie, to the one that was supposed to be, 40 years later or whatever it was. So we did see Kyle Richards and I believe Charles Cyphers and a few others pop back up in those movies. So that was kind of cool. One of the cooler aspects of those trilogy was that, and that was about it.
True.
Really, I mean, other than one little tidbit that I had, I mean, that's all I had. The one thing that I found or at least that I'd heard that I thought was interesting about this is that John Carpenter actually, Donald Pleasance wasn't his first choice to play Dr. Loomis. He wanted either Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee to be Dr. Loomis. But apparently the amount of money that they were offering for the role, they were just like, nah, you're not meeting the Cushing Lee standard. So,
and especially with Cushing coming off of Star Wars at the time.
Yeah, so I'm sure his rate went way the hell up. But
Christopher, he said it was like one of the worst mistakes of his career, not taking it.
Hey, you could argue it. I mean, he did fine, and he went on to other things. But it seemed like Christopher Lee, especially, kind of disappeared for a little while. Like, I know he was doing tons of things, but like, he kind of had a little bit of a lull there for a while, didn't he? Before he kind of resurged towards the end of his career.
True. Yeah. And I mean, and thinking about that though, I don't know what your personal thoughts are on that, but I love Christopher Lee and everything, but I don't really see him in the role of Dr. Loomis because he seems like he's just as an imposing a figure as Michael is.
Yeah. He's
probably, and it's more of a, it's more of a grandfatherly sort of he's a doctor and everything, but he's not really imposing,
And look,
he's like your uncle or your grandfather or whatever, he's like the nice guy, and he's like, you see Christopher Lee, and he's like just tall, and he just didn't seem like it was that role for me.
Donald Pleasance does a great job in this movie. He really does, and he's kind of the, I wouldn't say unsung, but he's kind of the quiet heart of this movie in a way. You know, like especially in the way I think it's been viewed in all these years later. That being said, I think Peter Cushing would have been just fucking phenomenal in that part.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sure Christopher Lee would have done great as well. I mean, he always did, but man, Peter Cushing would have been like, I think that would have been perfect.
So they shot this with, I think the original budget was $300,000, and took them a little less than 3 weeks to shoot, and then it grossed over $47 million. Mm-hmm. Like I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, I did.
In today's numbers, that would be a budget of $1.4 million, and grossing just over $220 million.
God.
Right.
Yeah, so that really speaks to how successful it was then, and obviously still would be now. I mean, like,
yeah,
especially now by today's standards, anything made for that amount of money and makes that kind of money, holy shit.
Yeah. Let's talk about ROI.
And this really was helped John Carpenter, probably Deborah Hill too, take off and kind of legitimize their careers as well. Like, you know, they were able to kind of have, because this was so successful, that probably gave them more carte blanche to do what they wanted to do and the way they wanted to do things in the years that followed this. So
yeah,
it would be no different now. You know, I think if you pick it up and put it here and those numbers come out like you just said, Donnie, that this would take people to the stratosphere in their careers, no question.
Yeah, something else about the theme, the iconic theme that we're used to. It took John Carpenter 4 days to compose the entire score, not just the theme, but the entire score.
Yeah. Well, synthesizers, right?
Mm.
And it's a lot like the rest of the movie. It's so impactful, but it's so simple. You know,
yeah, right.
It's not, I don't think it's anything that like anyone that knows anything about music couldn't bang out pretty quick, but he did it. You know, so
yeah,
all the credit in the world goes to him.
Again, arguably, again, like we said, this is maybe arguably the best slasher film. One of the, it's important to history of horror and slasher movies, but also that score is probably one of, it's got to be in the top 5 most iconic film scores.
Yeah, absolutely.
For it being as you said, just like Tubular Bells for Exorcist would be up there too. But you immediately know it as soon as you hear it what it's from. There's no like, which movie was this? Kind of sounds familiar.
And you take that score, John Carpenter's score, out of this movie, and you put in any other random score of the horror movies of the 70s, I don't think this movie is as successful as it went on to be. It plays such a massive part.
Oh yeah.
And the way he staggered it and used it in the movie as well, because if you pay attention, like, you don't really hear it much unless Michael's around, right? Is there any other score of the movie musically?
That's
other than when Michael is around.
Yeah, synthesizer, whatever you call them. What do you call the little 30-second or whatever cues?
Yeah, it's
just
more of a stinger.
30
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Other than that,
yeah, it's something I mentioned in my closing thoughts before we submit our ratings. Soundtracks make or break a movie, and totally worth debating how effective Halloween would be without this theme. If you take away that theme, is it the same movie? Does it have that much of an impact? Like, just take another iconic theme, from just look anything
of the time. I don't think it would have.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would have been fine, but it's just such a big part of this. Like, you take it out, man. I don't know if it hits the same.
Well, actually, I think I heard somewhere kind of in the research for this, the whole reason that he went through and actually did the whole soundtrack is because he showed it to a movie executive who watched the entire movie and found it boring. Just really didn't have much to it. So that's what kind of drove him to make that soundtrack.
So I assume there was some other score or soundtrack to it, and then He went, or
didn't say.
Okay, or there was nothing, and he went back and there had to have been something, right? I mean, it's a fucking movie. Almost all movies have something. So,
and you don't really think about it, but I mean, back then the themes were an important part of a movie. Now you don't hear it. Like you can't like say, well, what was the theme to, I don't know, whatever any given horror movie, and you can't really think of it in
like
modern times.
Hellraiser.
Yeah, now
I don't fucking know.
Well, at least it does have some memorable stuff from the first couple flicks, and then they just kind of reuse that over and over again.
Yeah. But modern movies, you don't. I think it's become a thing to for the soundtrack to just blend into the background. It's just to be there simply to enhance a little bit of this or that. You don't really hear themes these days. Like back then, you had Jaws. I mean, everything had a theme. Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, even the Italian films like Goblin with Dario Argento and all that stuff. Everybody had that, one of the strong soundtrack themes, and now it just kind of blends into the background. It's just part of.
Also, it was also a different time then. You didn't rely so heavily on visuals and CGI to where it's much more of an implied type horror back then. So it's but
I mean, there's practically no blood in this.
Yeah.
True, yeah.
It's true.
But it's still effective as hell at achieving what it wants to achieve, even though it has relatively no blood.
Mm-hmm. Just like I was talking about, like Texas Chainsaw mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I mean, and that one's like literally like in the title, it's called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So already in your mind, you're like, oh fuck, this is going to be a bloodletting. It's just going to be nastiness from start to finish. But when you actually sit down and watch it, especially with today's lens, you're like, well, it's more of the Texas Chainsaw, creepy run around fest. It's not a bloody massacre, although there's some fucked up things that happen, but you get the point.
Yeah. I think that's just a sign of a great filmmaker whenever you can do that, because first of all, it's budgetary for that movie, I think, and Texas Chainsaw in this movie, to not have all that effects work in there is going to save you money. But to craft it in such a way that your imagination completes the graphicness, of like Texas Chainsaw, the meat hook scene or whatever. You don't really see hardly anything on there. You hear it, you see him from the front, hang on the meat hook, and you hear the sound effect of it and all that. And it's much more effective to me than if they just showed blood squirting out of the back and all that stuff.
Mm.
Thing in here, whenever he's stabbing with the butcher knife, you hear the sound more so than you see a whole lot of blood or anything.
Which I think is a good time to bring up the director of photography, Dean Cundy, the Panaglide camera, which is essentially a clone or like one of the early stages of Steadicam that they use for this movie. How I believe that is just as big a part of the finished product of this movie and the way people remember it as that music is, right? That first person perspective that you see at the beginning, that some people claim is one shot and it's not, and other moments throughout the movie. They use it a lot in this movie. I think that plays such an integral part of why this movie hits as well as it does as well. Hadn't been used much before that, although there is those comparisons to Black Christmas, right? Because there was some of that Steadicam type first person stuff that happened in Black Christmas.
You can pretty much say this is a development from Black Christmas, because I mean, some people maybe call Black Christmas one of the first slasher movies. I think the way I look at them is proto slashers. Pretty much Halloween I see as being the first actual slasher, and things that came before that and that influenced it, like Black Christmas or Psycho, are kind of like proto slashers or whatever. But even that being said, like I said, there's no real huge body count or gore quotient in this one, that would come with the imitators, like Friday the 13th, etc.
You're kind of a connoisseur of camera work and whatnot, right? And filmography, not filmography, cinematography, photography, all that stuff. So, what do you think about the work in this with the?
I think it's amazing. I mean, I think to me. I think along with Black Christmas, like these are like the first couple of movies that put you in the like it puts you in the point of view of the killer, almost like as you're watching it, you become the killer and you're running around sneaking up on these people. I mean, it definitely gives you the feel of creepiness.
Whereas, I think the main differences between those two movies, and we can talk to this because we've talked about Black Christmas in the past and now this, and we've all seen them a number of times. The biggest difference for these two movies is the fact that they don't waste any time in this movie showing you who the killer is.
Right.
Whereas in Black Christmas, spoiler alert, I'll give you a second, you never find out who the killer is. So but they still present everything the same way.
True. Yeah. And in this movie, even though you know who the killer is, they still craft it in such a way as you're waiting for him you want to see his face. At some point you hope that maybe you'll get unmasked and you'll see his face. And then there is that point a little bit near the end, but it's done with the lighting in such a way that you still don't get a really good look at it, especially if you're watching it on VHS or DVD. Maybe in the theater, 35 millimeter, you could see it better. But yeah, they play with the audience that way too. You kind of want to see what Michael looks like, but they don't really show it to you.
It's intermission time. Time to pause and refresh at the snack bar. During this short break, you can treat your taste of good food and sparkling cold beverages, including delicious Coca-Cola. If you're hot dog hungry, we have them. Sizzling, juicy hot dogs served in warm, oven-fresh buns. Plus a complete menu of all your favorites. Visit the refreshment center now. Enjoy delicious food and ice-cold Coca-Cola.
For you, the listeners of the All-American Spook Show podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. So I hopped on over to audible.com and I didn't type in just Halloween because, that'd send back, 10,000 results and it'd just be about trick-or-treating or something. So I typed in Michael Myers to see what would pop up, and we've got, Smoke, this is for you, the official movie novelization of Halloween Kills. That's just over 8 hours long by Tim Wagner. So I'm sure that'll float your boat this Halloween season.
Oh, definitely.
Let's see. We've got Michael, My Brother, Lost Boy of NXS by Jen Jewel Brown, Tina Hutchins. That one's almost 11 hours long. It's about the dude from NXS.
Jesus.
And we've got, let's see, Hollywood Monsters, Fiendishly Famous by Kenny Abdo. Well, hell, that one's an Audible exclusive, but it's only about 18 minutes long, so very short. But if any of that floats your boat, you can hop on over to audibletrial.com/spookshow. Again, that's audibletrial.com/spookshow for your free audio book. So now I'm going to hop on back over to IMDb, and I'm going to click on plot summary if I can find it on the screen here. There it is. Let's see how many we've got. Donnie, I'm sure they got a long one for you. I mean, this is Halloween, for God's sake. Nothing scarier than a long synopsis for Donnie here at Halloween.
True.
And there's a longer one, but there's not like a really crazy long one. So I'll read the brief one. 15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night, 1963, Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois, to kill again. The longest one they've got here is submitted by Nick Reganis. October 31st, 1963. Haddonfield, Illinois. Possessed by an unfathomable urge to kill, 6-year-old Michael Myers butchers his 15-year-old sister, Judith, on the night of Halloween. 15? I mean, I guess I've never really thought about how old she was, but 15? That seems a little young for what was going on there, right? What do I know?
Yeah, especially what we saw.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well.
Precisely 15 long years later, on the anniversary of the brutal murder, Michael escapes from Smith Grove Sanitarium, a mental health facility for the criminally insane, and returns home. And before long, Michael becomes fixated on blissfully unsuspecting high school student Laurie Strode and her friends, Annie and Linda. In the meantime, Myers' psychiatrist, Dr. Samuel Loomis, and skeptical Sheriff Lee Brackett comb the town to ferret out the mentally unstable inmate. However, the shadows are thick, and the silent killer is always one step ahead of them. Has Michael Myers returned to pick up where he left off? And that's the question we're left with here. So, yeah.
Oh, I thought we were talking about Cancer, the silent killer.
No, that's more the long con. I don't think Michael's into that.
Okay. I mean, it was 15 years. I mean.
Yeah, smoke, please.
Now the waiting game begins.
Collect Marlboro Miles.
Michael just stands over to the side, watches.
Fucking morbid.
We'll speed it up. Filterless camels. We'll speed it up a little bit.
Yeah. Fucking morbid creep. I think you have to start right at the opening of this movie. Iconic. Just iconic opening. The black screen with the font, the music, the pumpkin. I mean, everything about this is just fucking horror heaven, right? It's so well done, and it gets you in the mood, especially back then. Like, you know, nowadays, if you think about it, like the long credit sequence is kind of dead. You know, most movies these days just kind of get to the point. Every once in a while, you know, right? There'll be one that has kind of the minute or two long credit sequence, but really that kind of art form to kind of like set the mood just with the credits and kind of ease you into, all right, this is what the movie's about. This one does it so well, but that's kind of a dying art form, wouldn't you think?
Oh yeah, yeah. And then you get some movies like Mandy where the title of the movie doesn't come until like 30 minutes into it or something.
Yeah. I think it was like the first 45 minutes are considered the cold open or something.
Yeah.
Which is what got Will so deep into that movie that he was invested until the very last minutes. But right out the gates, that's where you get the Panaglide camera, the Steadicam first person shots of a young Michael creeping up on his sister and stabbing her to death. Now, I guess we could have the small conversation here of like, why? Right? Like, and I think these are things that got explored a little bit more into that, you know, newer trilogy that just came out and in movies that came after this, you know, the other sequels that kind of don't count anymore, I guess, however you want to look at it. Why? What the hell is wrong with Michael? Why does he do these things? Why did he go off and kill his, you know, let's keep it specific to that scene, I guess. Why did he kind of slip into the abyss and just kill his sister randomly like that?
Yeah, first of all, this movie doesn't give you any answers to that.
No.
You know, it's just, it puts you at it, and then he was in the asylum until he wasn't in the asylum and escaped. Killing people. But that's basically all it gives you as far as his background psychology, except what Dr. Loomis tells you after he was institutionalized.
Yeah, well, I guess you kind of have to put two and two together as the movie progresses that, like, he's just an empty husk. There's no, like, I think Loomis says many times, like, there's no soul behind the eyes, right? Like, he's just a mindless, evil machine, you know, hell-bent on killing for killing's sake, I guess, right?
Well, he's the boogeyman, too. I think you remember that.
Yeah.
Sort of, in this movie, he was kind of, I guess, not meant to have that much of a backstory, because I think one of the other names he's called, and I don't remember if he's called it, I don't think he's called this in the movie, right? The Shape?
Yeah, well, I think that's what they call him in the credits, but I don't think they ever.
Yeah.
Other than
they
just
don't
Michael,
refer to him.
They
as
never
the
call
Shape.
him that, but yeah, in the credits it says the Shape.
I think he was just made sort of the quintessential boogeyman of Halloween or whatever, you know. So I guess maybe they just didn't want to flesh out the whys as a kid of what made him that way.
How about when they, you know, like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, of course, Rob Zombie's movies now, they go into a whole psychological breakdown of him as a child.
Yeah, and that, you know, look, I appreciate him trying what he tried to do, I guess, but like, I don't think Michael, I really don't think Michael needs an explanation.
No, that's something I could definitely have done without in those movies.
Yeah, because
it's sort of
my thing, it downplays Michael, because in my opinion, it's always been like, not knowing his motivation and not knowing exactly what the hell he is the creepy part. If you try to give him a reason for what he was doing, like Rob Zombie's 2 movies did, then you actually feel some sympathy for him.
Yeah.
Right? You're kind of rooting for him a little bit, and you don't want to root for Michael Myers, right? Mm-hmm. It's like rooting for the devil or Darth Vader or something, like, you know, it's the same mistake the Star Wars movies made, arguably, right? So like, you don't want to feel that for them. You just want to know that these things are evil and you want them to be dead, or you want your heroes to run away from them. That's what you want. You know, you want to fear them, not empathize or sympathize with them, whatever.
Yeah, that's something that came a little bit later. They didn't really do that at this time period and with horror movies too much. It wasn't until, I guess, when you went to the later 90s and earlier 2000s, they wanted to do it that way, as far as giving it empathy, sympathy, and stuff for the villain.
Yeah.
Or make him maybe, villain, is he not the villain? Is what, you know, ambiguous.
Yeah. How about when the scene when Michael breaks out of mental hospital. I love that when they just, it's a nurse driving Loomis up to the hospital, and they're going there to transfer him to a different hospital or something, right? And when they drive up, it's of course it's a thunderstorm, raining hard, and when they pull up, all you see is that like the headlights pointing toward like a field, a field or something, and there's just a bunch of mental hospital patients just wandering around out in the pouring rain. Like, it's just creepy as fuck, like it's almost
when they let them start walking around at night.
Yeah, it's almost like Night of the Living Dead-esque.
Yeah.
And what about the effectiveness? And, because really a lot of this movie, you're not going blow by blow here. A lot of this movie really is like, all right, Michael's out of the mental hospital and he's gone back to Haddonfield. So it's just him creeping around the town for, the next 45 minutes or so, give or take. That's pretty much all it is. So but what do you think of the effectiveness of that? Like him standing at the clothesline and then they kind of do a double take and then he's gone. Or they're walking down a long sidewalk and they see him standing up above and then he just kind of ducks behind the bush. And then when they go look, he's gone. That kind of shit, right? Like really, really effective, creepy shit, right? The way they did him here, right?
Yeah. It was good setting up for what comes later.
Yeah. Plus, you never see him run. You never see him in any sort of hurry at all. He's just like, no. And that also, like you said, kind of is the appeal that he's just, I guess, maybe psychologically he's always a step ahead. Yeah. He doesn't have to move fast.
Well, now remember, this was all explained well in Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie
Vernon. Yes. It's a lot of endurance and cardio.
Yeah. A lot of work.
That's right. Yeah.
A lot of work into his thinking ahead stuff.
You're, not catching up with somebody or not running after him and still catching them.
What did you think of the, all right, Michael breaks out of the mental hospital, right? And then he immediately jumps in the car and drives away. All right.
That's smoke.
He's been in the mental hospital since he was 6 years old. But I do appreciate Carpenter and Deborah Hill trying to explain it off, right? At least they did throw that line in there, like, basically, how the fuck did he drive? Well, somebody here must have taught him. And moving on,
Why wouldn't you teach a crazy person?
Yeah, killer how to,
Especially because he's like, what did he say? Like, I spent the first 7 or 8 years trying to understand him. And then I've spent like the last 7 or 8 years trying to make sure he never leaves here. Right. That's the line. So
let me grab him real quick so I can take him away.
So when in that time period did somebody grab him and decide to teach him how to drive a fucking car? Was it in that first 7 or 8 years?
I don't know, man. Was it? I mean, did they have, they would have had TVs in like mental institutions, right?
You think you'd pick up how to drive a car just watching TV? I mean, like,
man.
You might get the premise of it, like, okay, get in here, get behind the wheel, vroom, vroom, go. But, like, would you know how to do it,
Did they have how it's made back then?
No, I doubt it.
They had no idea.
They had, like, at
how
best,
it's made.
They had at best, like, 4 fucking channels back then. I doubt they had anything informational other than PBS.
I don't know.
This last time with my wife, whatever, when he was driving by in the background, the shot with Lori and everything, and I was like, would have been hilarious if he just like ran up on the curb, because he doesn't know really how to drive, up on the curb. And they turn around, what the fuck? And he just drives off the curb and leaves.
that reminds me of another little Easter egg that I saw pointed out, just like the audience reaction thing. It's one of those YouTube or TikTok, wherever the fuck it was, things. That scene where Loomis is with the cops, and they're at one of the scenes where Michael has done something, and then Michael drives by in the background. You remember that? Yeah. Like you see the stolen car?
Yeah.
If you look closely at that shot where he's sitting at the stop sign, Michael looks both ways before he takes off. This crazed, mindless husk of a serial killer, he knows well enough to look both ways before he pulls out.
That's awesome.
I don't want to T-bone anybody.
I don't want to kill anybody unintentionally.
Yeah, until I'm ready.
We should probably talk about, since he's already got it at this point in the movie, his mask.
Oh, yeah. Now, remember, if you remember correctly, this is a while back. Donnie, maybe you can look up the episode number while we're talking, but we talked about that during the the Devil's Reign episode. Because this was a while back. This is years back now, so I don't remember the episode.
Episode number 37.
There you go. So go all the way back to episode 37. But Smokey, you want to talk about what the mask is and where it came from?
Yeah. And I'm sure most people probably, or at least a good many horror fans know this. And maybe there's some people that are listening that don't. But basically, it's a Captain Kirk mask.
Yeah.
That unpainted, just flesh-colored, William Shatner mask that Tommy Lee Wallace, who was working on the film, special effects and makeup effects and whatnot, painted it that bluish white color. He also widened the eyes, I guess, by maybe just pulling on the latex or whatever. He made the eyes wider from the nose. And the hair, he did a little bit something different with the hair, I guess, and made it. But still, basically, if you look at that, if you look at it and you think about it for half a second, it just looks like Captain Kirk with, slightly different eyes.
Well,
Same color.
I never would have. I never made, until I heard that so many years ago. I never made that connection that it looked like William Shatner. Like just looking at it, I'm like, well, it's just some creepy pale mask. But once it brings it to your attention, though, then it's hard not to not see it or whatever. Yeah, then you can't unsee it. Like once it's been said, like, oh yeah, that's Shatner. But do you remember in that Devil's Reign episode what we were talking about was they made some type of plaster or something, some mold of his face for that movie, and that is the mold that they made the Captain Kirk mask from. So that is your connection to Devil's Reign. And remember in that movie he kind of had the creepy eyes. Remember that was what happened to him when they became possessed or something. They just got weird empty eyes. And then they melted or that movie's wacky as hell, but they melted into rainbow wax or something. But that look, that's what it's from. So that is, I found that a really interesting, cool connection to of all movies, The Devil's Reign. Good Lord. Right. Speaking of the mask and everything, though, how about once again, the effective creepiness and just, simple but yet scary type stuff that they did in this movie with in the first person camera shots and stuff, especially the breathing in the mask. And you get that at the end again and everything. But how awesome is that? How effective is that? And it's such a simple thing. Although I guess maybe they were ripping Darth Vader. I don't know. and also too the shots of the camera through the mask, eye holes.
Yeah, I was about to say the POV, which actually starts at the very beginning with the clown mask when he's 6 years old and kills his sister. They use a POV of that. As he picks up the mask off the floor or whatever and puts it over the camera lens, his eyes or whatever, and then you're watching through the eye holes of the mask, and then they carry that forward when he's doing the killing in Haddonfield later.
It seems like I read or saw somewhere too that like apparently I guess when they were kind of in that indecisive what should Michael look like phase, they actually thought about going with the clown mask. So, like that, and narratively in the story, that would have made probably more sense than him just finding some random mask at a gas station or whatever. Where did he get the mask from? I forget. Or did they even show
the hardware? Or some kind of store that was doing it just because of Halloween time.
Maybe that's
just a Halloween mask that he broke into.
The clown mask would have made sense because of, that's the one that he picked up when he killed his sister and all that, right? But it also makes sense that this mindless, crazed person would just grab the first thing that he, he makes the connection in his mind. Well, when I did that to my sister, I was wearing a mask, so I need a mask. Where's the mask? Okay,
I need this
one.
Mask right here.
He wouldn't be looking for a specific mask, which I think is where it kind of went off the rails in that newer trilogy, right? There was something about the mask where he.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not getting back into that. It just keeps coming back to mind every time.
I know. Yeah.
Sorry.
We keep referencing it too much. I guess
we're referencing three shitty movies when we're talking about the greatest of the franchise right here. Also, another effective scare, just the simple jump scares in this movie. And now I know it's like jump scares. Oh, please, fuck off, right? But like, there are some really good ones in this movie, and that those music stingers we were talking about play a big part in that because it'll just be something random that'll, it's beyond just the cat jumping out and going, this is like something will happen, like a limb will hit a window or something, right, will happen, and then, and it's that same type of stinger when like Michael strikes at something. So when you hear that, you're kind of conditioned pretty quick to react, like, oh, fuck, is that Michael? No, it's just that thing. But I think really effective jump scares.
You get bored with jump scares as we're here in 2023.
Yeah.
But I think if they're going to be used in a horror movie, slasher movies are kind of where they belong. Not necessarily in, or maybe ghost type movies or whatever. But not in, this is going to be kind of, not in, let's say, an Exorcist movie. But we'll get to that at some point. You don't need them in that type of movie. But slasher movies, to a certain degree, even though it's kind of a cheap thing, that, like I said, at this time it wasn't cheap. It became stereotypical later.
Speaking of things that are out of place, Judith Meyer's grave. Doesn't that have to be the smallest grave ever dug for a 15-year-old, I assume, girl? Now that we heard that synopsis earlier.
Unless they, buried her, standing vertical.
Yeah, and folded her in half. Maybe. I mean, because it looks like it's about 2 foot deep, and not what would be a normal grave length, like at least 6 foot to 8 foot long, right? At least 2 to 4 foot wide, something like that. Now this looks like it's about 2 foot by 4 foot, and about a foot and a half deep. Oh no, these damn kids coming out here digging up graves. It just looked
those wacky kids.
Yeah. You get a lot of that in this movie, too, because I guess everybody in the town is dismissive of everything because it's fucking Halloween, right? Oh, these goddamn kids today, that happens at least 4 or 5 separate occasions.
Her walking through town carrying a gravestone.
Yeah.
Come on, weird.
Once again,
Well, I guess in this one, nobody paid attention to it, so in the future ones, they pay attention to everything.
Yeah. Another thing that I found was weird about this movie was the geography of the town. It's weird. It's like the biggest small town in America, because on one hand, it feels like everything's taking place in 3 or 4 blocks. But then in another, it'll be like Lori gets picked up by her friend in a car, and then they drive so far away that it's dark by the time they get there. That didn't seem like it's a few streets over kind of thing. That seems like 2 towns over passage of time. So the geography of the town is weird to me. But I do think they did nail the aesthetic of the small town. Although they did shoot this in the Los Angeles and Pasadena area and everything, it definitely has that Halloween time, small town, any town feel to it. Just the look. I think the scouting locations and everything, they nailed it. The look of everything. And it literally looks like it could be just about any town in America.
True. Yeah, they did a great job of just any town USA.
Yeah.
In the fall. In the fall.
Yeah.
I think he said it's shot in the spring, right?
Yeah, it was like, what did I say in the notes? It was like April to May of that year.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And they make it look like it's, Halloween Eve, Halloween Day.
Yeah, they just had to move a whole bunch of piles of leaves at various places they need them for different shots.
Donnie, we get to one of your favorite parts when he choked out the dog, or whatever the hell he did to the dog.
Yeah.
We've already got an early nominee for the Chookie.
Fantastic. All right.
What? It's the In Memoriam segment. We have to memorialize.
Yeah.
Old
it'll,
Butch or whatever it was. So you'll see it again.
Sure, it'll happen.
You'll see it again. Smoke, I'm sure you appreciated the Thing from Another World playing on
yes,
television.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Great little and a nod to Carpenter's remake of The Thing later. I mean, I know it's one of his favorite films. Why he probably put it in there in this movie.
Now, do you think he had any idea whatsoever that, within the next 3 or 4 years, I'm going to be making, trying to remake The Thing, or was that just happenstance that,
Yeah, I would assume. I've never read anything about that, but I would assume, like I said, unless somebody will come out with an interview and say, no, he said he was going to do it. But not having heard anything like that, I would assume that no, he probably had no idea that he would have been able to get his hands on doing a remake of The Thing at this time before Halloween hit theaters.
I think the first kill that you see on screen is Annie, if I'm correct, right? Because I think there was at least 1 or 2 before that, but I think the first one you see on screen was Annie when, after like a dozen teases, right? Then she gets stuck in the window, nothing happens. Like, she could have been killed like 5 times. And then finally, it's when she gets in the car to go pick up her boyfriend or whatever that Michael jumps out of the back seat. I did like that nice little spot in there too when she gets in and kind of like looks around and there she notices the windows fogged up. And then that's when he grabs a hold of her. But the part I didn't like about it was that her eyes went cross. It just looks stupid as hell. Like, he chokes her out and then he's choking her and then he stabs her or something. And then when she dies, she's just cross-eyed. Just, and I think another one, one of the other girls that gets killed a little bit later, maybe it's Linda, when the bodies pop back up, she's cross-eyed. This is like the goofy equivalent to like cartoons, you know, when somebody's dead and they put X's over their eyes. That's
where their tongue's hanging out.
Yeah, that's all they were doing. They just go cross-eyed. Oh, she's dead. Talk about uncomfortable things other than, you know, corpses going cross-eyed. The god-awful, terrible Bob joke that he makes about, like, I'm going to rip your clothes off, and then I'm going to rip your clothes off, and then, then we're both going to rip Lindsay's clothes off. Like, whoa, dude. Lindsay's
well, you got to test the waters.
Yeah, Lindsay's like 5, Hoss. Slow down, partner. And the fact that that Carpenter and Hill or whatever felt that this was such a great line and joke that they left it in there. You know? Bad. Didn't age well. Not that it was okay in 1978, but certainly didn't play now. One of the more iconic kills, I think, in the movie is when he kills Bob. That's Linda's boyfriend who's, you know, they've had sex and then he goes downstairs or whatever. He stabs him and pins him to the wall. And then he just stands there and stares at him and like tilts his head back and forth. I mean, like, how soulless of a maniac, I guess, however you want to phrase this, do you have to be to like brutally murder somebody and then just stand there and stare at them as the last breath goes out of their body, as they're pinned against the wall. You stuck them so hard and you had such strength that you pinned them to the fucking wall. And this is replayed over and over again throughout the Halloween franchise history, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we see this time and again.
But this is the first, so this is the best. Michael, I think, even had a sense of humor, though, because right after that, remember, he puts the sheet on and acts like he's a ghost or whatever when he walks in on Naked Linda, but he puts Bob's glasses on. Some of the forethought really does bring to mind, what we were just talking about, Behind the Mask, Leslie Vernon, because like you've got he had enough wherewithal to put the sheet on with the glasses. So fuck you, I just killed your boyfriend. I'm going to pretend I'm him. You know, like he.
I mean, I could have killed you at the point. I'm just going to fuck with you now. You know?
You're dead. I'm just fucking with you. You don't even know it. The thing that we're about to talk about, the tombstone, his sister's tombstone bit, like that's a lot of pre-planning, right?
Yes. Like I said, not the least of which was having to drag that heavy ass stone all the way from the graveyard there.
Yeah, maybe that's what we saw when they visited the grave site. That wasn't necessarily due to this body that he dug up. Maybe it was just that he dug up the tombstone.
You know what?
That's why it looks so small.
Yeah, it's been almost 45 years for us to figure this out.
Yeah, exactly. I think we uncovered the secret.
Yeah.
By the way, that is some serendipity that you just mentioned there. Remember the date. Remember the date that I said this movie came out. It came out October 25th of 1978. This episode today comes out on October 23rd, 2023. Almost literally 45 years to the day. We're 2 days away.
Crazy.
And depending on when you're listening to it, right? You might actually be on the 45th anniversary. And trust me, we did not plan that. We're not that clever.
Listen, well, we kind of like our entire lineage of movies comes across where, you know, we just kind of stumble into these little anniversaries and such.
I think it's another one, like, because we just decided that it was time to finally talk about Halloween. We didn't think, well, it's because of the 45th anniversary. No, it was just, let's just fucking do it. So,
we're not that smart.
Yeah, no. Smoke, do you think this was already a trope by 1978? Because it is now. The body discoveries. When all of a sudden just the bodies start falling out of everywhere, right? She turns around, somebody falls from the ceiling. You know, she opens up the door, somebody falls from the closet. You know, stuff like that. Like, that's been done a billion times.
The other, not even in like Herschel Gordon Lewis movies, you know, which you could say was maybe some of the precursors to splatter and slasher movies. But I don't even remember that happening there, where bodies are just discovered like that. I mean, I think I would say this is one of, if not the first, where that plays an element in the movie. And of course, it was used to greater effect, I guess, in like all the Friday the 13th movies. Right?
Oh yeah. Friday the 13th, the whole franchise really comes to mind when I think about that. Like, there'll always be the final girl who doesn't realize everyone is dead until she finally sees the first body, and then the bodies just fall from the skies everywhere, you know. So
in the case of Jason, he like props them up in all kind of different ways anyways for them to discover, just so he can toy with them cat and mouse style again.
Yeah. Which makes even less sense than Michael Myers, because Jason is some kind of otherworldly ghoul, really, right? Michael
is basically a zombie, at least, you know. He's killed in a very obvious way in every film. And even, you know, finally in part 4, right, where and in part 6, he really does come back as basically a zombie. You could argue the same for Michael, as he's, you know, I shot him 6 times, as we'll get to.
Yeah. Well,
but he's also killed at the end of just about every one of them, if not everyone.
Speaking of, you can't kill this motherfucker. So she's the final, you know, fight, the final showdown between Laurie and Michael. He's got her cornered, and he's running around cat and mouse, whatever. She stabs him with a sewing needle to the neck, a clothes hanger to the face. I'm going to assume right in the fucking eye. I don't know. And then she sticks him with a knife to the gut. Nope. Doesn't do shit. That's when you should know you're in trouble, right? I mean, well, she knew she was in trouble. I just don't think she knew the level of trouble that she was into. Then you get the famous, that I mentioned earlier, you get the famous setup scene where, like, she's got him down that final time. I think it's when she does the knife to the gut. He's down. And then she kind of like is gathering herself. But you see Michael in the background behind her, the way they frame the shot. She's standing there like crying and upset and kind of catching her breath. And then behind her, you see Michael do the dead man setup. The Undertaker just gong, set straight up. Now I have heard, referencing the Undertaker, that is exactly where Undertaker got that from. Was from Michael Myers, because obviously this is like 15 years before the Undertaker was a thing, give or take, right? So that's exactly where he got it from, was the Michael Myers setup. So there is a connection there. Right after that, you get the brief unmasking that Smoke mentioned earlier. Like, just for a split second there, they pull it off. You kind of see a little bit of what he looks like, and then he quickly puts it back on. Loomis shows up, shoots Michael 6 times. He falls out of the window, and then he disappears. Like, I think he shoots him, he falls out of the window. So, he kind of goes back to Laurie like, are you all right? Yeah, whatever. And then he goes back to look, and then Michael's gone. Start the music, right?
So I do want to kind of go back to the unmasking a little bit. He does, he looks deformed, much like, Jason does when he was unmasked. Friday 13th.
I don't think it's quite to that level, but yeah, there's
his eye is slid down.
Yeah,
there's
something going on there. Yeah,
well, something.
Something. Yeah. Well, it could just be the clothes hanger to the fucking face that he just took. I don't know. It could be any.
It could have been. You're one load. I should have.
It could have been that too. It could have been dropped on his head.
Granny.
But he looks normal when he's 6, right? Like
Yeah.
By the way, going back to the beginning there, when Michael, and then they take the clown mask off, and he's just, oh no. Who reacts to that situation?
Crunch
Who reacts to that situation that way? Their 6-year-old walks out of the house with a fucking bloody knife, and they just take the mask off. Michael, and then just stand there and stare at him like, huh?
You got me.
I would have got away with it if it wasn't for you pesky parents.
Shit. Well, I like the final lines of the movie though. Laurie says to Loomis, "It was the boogeyman," and then Loomis says, "As a matter of fact, it was." And then that's that's pretty much it. And I also like the random shots of the scene. that they show with the mask breathing. That's how the movie ends. Is you see all the different houses where everything kind of happened, and you hear the, and then hit the music. Let's play it out. So yeah, it's man, what a fucking awesome movie. What a treat to be able to watch it again for the 100th
Straight
time.
up.
And I'll watch it 100 times more.
Yep.
But so I guess it's time to go ahead and dive into our ratings. So Smoke, we'll let you go first since you're the old Halloween hat here.
Yeah, this, like I said, I don't know how many times I've seen this movie. Not just about every Halloween season. At some point, from near the end of September to the beginning of November, we're gonna watch this movie, my wife, at least once. A lot of times, you end up seeing bits and pieces of it again because it's on whatever streaming service stuff is running all through Halloween. So I couldn't count on how many hands. How many hands? I've only got 2 hands. I couldn't count how many times I've seen this movie. So and it never gets old. It's just a classic. Just like The Thing, when we were talking about the movie, The Thing, and I'll get to. I think we want to talk about what necessarily what our favorite Carpenter films are. I guess I'll wait until we've done all our ratings until we say that. Maybe this one, I don't think I couldn't go any lower than. I'm going to go 4 3/4 with it. Actually, I guess I will divulge at this point. It's probably a good time because anybody who's paying attention who listened to our episode on The Thing, I can't remember how many, if not all of us, maybe gave it a 5. I know. Or somewhere close to that, maybe.
Yeah, 3 of us gave a 5. 3 of us gave a 5 on that one. Will still hasn't gave his 2 cents on that one because I don't think he's been able to watch The Thing yet, right, Will?
Right.
Yeah, so he's still kind of open-ended there, but yeah, we all gave 5s on that one.
So that right there lets you know. But, for me, The Thing is my favorite John Carpenter one, just by a little over this one because, like I said, I give this one 4 3/4, and I gave The Thing 5. And so that's where I'll stand with it. Arguably, I could have given this a 5 too, but I just I like The Thing just a little bit more, and that's just personal, just my personal favorite of his movies. And very important to horror, and I definitely acknowledge that, and could watch it over and over again, and have, and will again.
For my 2 cents, I'm going to say this is a 5, and it's the same thing I gave The Thing, but like I really probably I would give The Thing a slight edge, if I'm comparing the two. But this is just so well done and effective that I have to give it its flowers too. Not just because it launched, the character of Michael Myers and everything, but like this movie is so extremely well done, and it's because of its simplicity, right? It is such a simple movie. Dude does something when he's a kid. Something's wrong with him. He goes to a mental hospital. He breaks out of the mental hospital. He comes back to the scene of the crime and just starts butchering people for no apparently good reason. They managed to quote unquote take him out, but not really. Hit the music, that's the movie right there. And then meanwhile, just throw in awesome cinematography, awesome, score, everything. And this movie looks so good too. The look of it, just the production value of it for a movie that was made for what, $325,000, give or take.
Yeah.
God,
and just it's the simplicity of the story being a slasher movie. Yeah. Arguably, the first one or one of the first ones. But yeah, they took so much care with that, like you said, with the crafting of the movie, from cinematography to lighting to set design to soundtrack to all of that. So. They could have taken the easier route out, but they didn't. They were attention to detail throughout the whole thing, I think, and got the most out of that $300,000.
So for me, for the same reasons but different reasons, just like The Thing, I'm going to give it 5 stars. So Donnie, where you at?
And you guys raised some pretty good points as far as I thought I was going to be maybe alone in this, but we talked earlier about there not being a whole lot of a whole lot of gore in it. Not so much blood. Typically, I don't want to say typically, but I will say typically, if a movie doesn't have, a horror movie of this, I don't want to say of this type, but in the past, if it doesn't have a whole lot of gore, if it kind of would, and I guess usually kind of lend heavy into the gore side. If it didn't, it would knock it down a peg for me. But this being such a influential, iconic film, I don't think. I mean, you don't really need it. It's effective without it because of the implied the soundtrack. I mean, we've already discussed this, but yeah, it's excellent. Cannot recommend it more. I'm actually going to echo your rating, Josh, and say 5 stars.
Will, what do you say?
I'm going to go with a 5. I mean, honestly, with pretty much all the reasons that y'all had already said, but the driving factor for me is just the simplicity of the story. Crazy person doesn't have any rhyme or reason, and he's just off butchering people, and these people are just trying to survive. I think it's similar to, say, like almost like a movie, say like Jaws, where there's this one killing machine. That's all it wants to do, and everybody is just trying to, live through it. I'm sure it scared some teenage girls from babysitting.
Yeah.
Just like like late at night, just like Jaws did from people getting in the water.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to go with the 5.
Yeah. Hard to argue. And that gives us an almost perfect score of 4.9 out of 5 stars. So no one's going to fault you, Smoke, there for bringing it down a little bit. There's no doubt about that. This is a 5-star, top-notch effort from John Carpenter, Deborah Hill, and everyone involved. And not to mention, too, we didn't really talk a lot about how well Jamie Lee Curtis did in this movie. I mean, like,
No doubt.
for her first movie, like,
Yeah.
she's fucking, she knocks it out of the park, man. I mean,
Yeah.
even if she'd never done another horror movie, she's an all-time scream queen just for this movie, right?
Yeah, straight up.
As it turns out, she did do quite a few other ones. Well, although I don't think we've done any of other ones yet, right?
Well, other than Mother's
Or horror
Boys.
movie funerals.
Well,
Yeah, other than the Halloween movies.
Yeah, Mother's Boys and the newer ones. That was, I think.
Yep.
But yeah. But we're almost done, but not quite.
Connections from the crypt.
Yeah, right. All right. So yeah, I mean, if this is your first time kind of joining us, what we do with Crypt Connections, we connect the current movie episode by any cast or crew connections to past Spook Show episodes. So for Halloween 1978, we look back at the cast, the cast member with the most connections to the Spook Show would be Jamie Lee Curtis. Plays Laurie Strode. She dates back to when we did Halloween from 2018, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, and Josh's favorite, Mother's Boys. And also the on the crew side, probably no surprise here, John Carpenter, also for the same 3 recent trilogy movies, as well as The Thing from 1982. So yeah, that's that would be the connections for Halloween 1978.
All right, thanks for that, Donnie.
All right, I came up with 5 deaths. We have Judith, who got stabbed. Got the mechanic, who I'm assuming was just bludgeoned to death. Annie, who was strangled and then her throat cut. Bob, who got stabbed through the chest. And Linda, who was strangled with the phone cord.
Well, you're heartless.
I know.
So that leads us to... Let's talk about the kill reel.
Highlight kill.
I think this is a pretty simple one, in my opinion. I'm going to go with Bob getting stabbed and pinned to the wall. I think that's one of the more iconic kills, because some of the other ones, there's 1 or 2 that are off screen, And some of the other ones are just like that weak ass one with what is Annie in the car? She goes cross-eyed, stuff like that. So like, and you can't count what happens with Michael, right? Because Michael. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with Bob getting stabbed and pinned to the wall as Michael stares at him as he takes his last breaths.
Gore score.
Well, we've already kind of discussed this. There's not much gore or even blood splatter a whole lot in this movie, but as we've also said, it was effective without it, just as Texas Chainsaw Massacre was effective with a very minimal body count and splatter. So, as I usually do, as the gore score is based on Chaz Balin's gore score back in the 80s, I'm going to defer to what he gave it. Usually what I do is if it's an older movie that is covered by him in like Deep Red Horror Handbook or whatever that he's given a score for, I'll review that and then kind of see if I maybe change a little bit depending on the times, because there's been a lot more super gory movies that have come out since that time period. So sometimes I'll adjust it. For this one though, I'm going to go with Chaz's score. You gave it a 3. I'm going to keep it as a 3 as well. I think that's fair enough for it. Very minimal splatter and gore, but it definitely doesn't need it. It's effective without it.
Yeah, for a movie that has the reputation, like as the first slasher and Michael Myers and everything's Killing Machine and all that, very little gore. So I think it's pretty fair. So if you're gauging your viewing experience based on the gore score, I think that's a pretty fair assessment of it. There's some messed up stuff here and there's nudity and stuff like that, but not a lot of blood, for a movie of this type. So I think it's fair. So.
Yeah, like I said, it's probably budgetary mainly. I mean, they're probably trying to keep that down some, so
yeah,
didn't want to go with elaborate stuff, and or maybe it was just a conscious decision. I haven't ever heard him in any interview about that why it was almost bloodless, but it works.
Well, needless to say, we highly recommend you checking out Halloween if you haven't. Hopefully, we haven't completely ruined the experience for you if you haven't watched it and you've listened to this entire thing. But if you have, trust me, there's some other stuff you need to witness it, even though we've spoiled it for you. You need to see it for yourself if you haven't. So, run.
Yeah. So crawl out from that rock that you've been living under if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, for the last literally 45 years you've had to watch this movie. Well, let's face it. That's not I would imagine that's not the case here. I'm sure anyone listening to this has probably watched it. No. So, like I said, we've seen it 100 times, and we'll all see it 100 times more. So, just a fucking classic horror flick. And honestly, we might have found our highest rated movie for the next Spookshow Awards already this year, right? Because this counts for next year.
Maybe so, yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if we're talking about this one being the highest rated one all year. So
certainly going to be in there.
Yeah. So speaking of that, we're about to wrap up our year. This is kind of the end of the year and the beginning of the year, so to speak. Next week, we celebrate our anniversary, but this isn't just any old regular anniversary. This is our 5th anniversary. We started in 2018 and we've made it all the way here to the year 2023. So a lot of ups, lots of downs, but here we are. We're still alive. Somewhere in the middle of the road, we found Donnie hitchhiking. We picked him up in the last few years. So it's been something. So come celebrate with us next week, where the gimmick that we always do every year on our anniversary, which is always a lot of fun for us. It's a chance for us to re-rate the movies that we've done over the past year. So if, say 6 months ago, Donnie gave a movie 3 stars and he's thought about it some more, maybe he's watched it again since then and he decided, you know what, I'm going to give that 2 stars. It sucked. This is his chance to do that. But this is the only chance that we get to re-rate stuff. So you want to come back next Monday at 6 p.m. East like usual. Except we're actually going to release it. We usually release it on Halloween, but we're going to kind of get what about a 6-hour jump start on Halloween, and we're going to release it Monday night at 6 p.m. East. So wherever you get your podcast, go check it out over on the YouTube channel, all the places we are, and of course aaspookshow.com. So for Will, Donnie, Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We are the All-American Spook Show, and we'll see you next week as we celebrate 5 years of the Spook Show.
Please replace the speaker on its rack when you're ready to leave. Failure to do so will damage both the speaker and your car. We'll be grateful, and so will the patrons who follow you.